Good morning, everyone. Ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guests. My name is Dr. Richard Fijo, and I'm a Larrakia man from Darwin, from my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather in what Aboriginal culture calls grandfather law. To be honest, I'm very close to this man, and I hold him very close to my heart, and I find it hard to talk this morning. I couldn't find the words. I'm sure many of us are hurting deeply the passing of this great man. And so when I came here this morning and I looked at his picture, I thought to myself, what would it be that this man would want me to say to honour him? I'm Balang, this man my bapa. And I look at his photo and I say, to honour this man, he would want me to say, to be strong, to be standing up, to be proud of our identity, to be proud of our clans, to be proud of who we are, our tribal regions. And Larrakia and Yolngu always had strong partnership together, and this man did so much. He did so much to inspire me. And when I look at this picture, I think to myself, this man wants me to keep going, to see with the way I saw him and go in spaces we'd never been to before. He's a source of power. He's such a great man for so many. And I think to myself, this is what he would want me to say, because this is what I feel he's speaking to me. We speak with the voice of our ancestors and those who impact on our lives. And this man has impacted on my life so profoundly. To honour him, I encourage all of you to listen and say, be proud in who you are, where you come from, and what you do. Always stand up. You have come by way of Larrakia land. While you're here, you'll hear the voices of our ancestors. When you leave, you'll take the Larrakia message with you. Reverend W. Fijo. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with a heavy heart, but with great honour, that I welcome each and every one of you to Larrakia land this morning. Thank you. Now my son, Richard Jr., will now commence a smoking ceremony. And as he starts, I'll walk through the fire. I will invite the family to follow me. I will invite the dignitaries to follow the family. I will invite everyone to follow. And once the smoking ceremony is done, we'll commence with Bungal. Thank you.
the swells, water, salt water, and fresh water, binding from the fresh to the salt water, going and making swells, getting ready for Jojanga here. This man is the nation of Jojanga, Barracuda nation. My Kutara. And the nation here, Yoti Indi, Mari Kutara. To invoke the doom of Jojanga. To invoke first, then other cycle. The parliament, Yolngu parliament, will open everything, secession. Tide now roaring, tide swells. What up, what up?
34 different clans.
No. 34 clan here. Jambar pengu, tatu, kolomala, orajungu. We are here to honor him. And Garaura. Barkadimo Omerjan, Ergo Omerjan. Pija Ergo. Ya come. Now the Barracuda. Honoring comes out from the doom. Honoring I am a Barracuda. Likan Goyongo Gondarra. The spear represents the body and the nose of the Barracuda. Yay! 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 Done. Invoked it now. Open. Mari Ngarudaya. Mari Almam. Nunamaradaya. You're all seated, please. Bookmark up Marala Ritua. And my session Raptuman. Bookmark now. Go. Mala as one. One people, one nation. All nation, come. Yo. This is a parliament now. Yolngu parliament. Yay! Hey! Yo. Cuy, rabangi. We stand in the parliament and calling, celebrating for the day. We are one. We are one nation. They are calling the nation first. Gondarra. Yay! Hey! 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 Hatutumba! Hatutumba! Akon mo? Rr! 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 Yay! 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 Hey! Hey! Well, Madam Junior. Now, Goyola's nation, that we have come together to honor him. Yay! 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 Hey! Atutumba! Atutumba! Marma. Galpo Nation. Yay! Salt water and fresh water. Both. Yo. Ngaimil. No, yo. Yay! Yay! Hey! Lingon, last Manye, second last Mari, the Mari nation as the grandmother nation. Me, yo, where are you? What do you want?
Bulok mana.
Yeah, the Barracuda nation.
Bulok mana yala wijing uyaram bargurke nekulan ban baltilin wakura kordolar pano puragaw ya.
Yay! Hey! Dani. Rr. Kanbo kornet be. Kanbo kornet be kono nga tutuan beri mga duri na bepinya na mo lang kalekan ko kara ora jadera. Yay! Hey! Atutumba. Ako mo. Yay! After the celebration, calling states, a different parliament, and the nation from the states, we celebrate. The last one is Garaura. Yay! He was one. He was one. Yay! He was one, but many, many, many nations in one. Yo, from the parliament to the people that invite us through the Yukolol. This is Yukolol. We started from the time of memorial to now that we always practice of our cycle and ceremony to present Gondarra, his bones, his flesh, and who he is, and his father clan to next father clans, that were here representing, and as well Mari, myself. Thank you.
Thank you all from Larrakia, Yongle. As I introduce this memorial service, I welcome you all, Bookmark, to this memorial service for this great man. I acknowledge that we are gathered here at this beautiful place, Nungalinya, on Larrakia land, and I thank Richard for his welcome. I acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Leah Finocchiaro, our new Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. Welcome. And her Deputy. To all distinguished guests, too many to name, that come from all around Australia to honour this great man, I bid you welcome. We gather here today to give thanks to God for the life of the Reverend Dr. Gondarra, and to affirm the Christian conviction that while death is the end of mortal life, it marks a new beginning in our relationship with God. And we gather to share the sorrow of those who mourn, and to offer to one another our love and our support at this time. Hear these words of Scripture. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. By his great mercy he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Now ask the Reverend Joan Gondarra to lead us in prayer.
You'll just pray. God Marlo, Napanlangang Dundang, Kumang Pumagarum, Peace Collab, you. When a project na Napanmina. Muram do Okoro. Ang down Yakuba from Ritomura Digim, you.
Let us pause for a prayer of confession. Creating and forgiving God, we confess that we have not always lived as your grateful children. We have not loved as Christ has loved us. Father, forgive us if there have been times when we failed the Reverend Doctor. Enable us by your grace to forgive anything that was hurtful to us. Have mercy on us and set us free from our sins, and grant us healing and wholeness through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, not counting our sins against us, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Hear then Christ's word of grace to us. Your sins are forgiven. Thanks be to God. Now let us share our tributes to this great man. And I'd asked if Melanie Wilkinson with Wapulawoi and maybe other members of family will come forward for a family tribute.
Hello everyone, my name is Rita Wopuroi Gondarra. I'm the third daughter of Reverend Dr. Gondarra. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and the custodians of this land which we meet today. I'd welcome you all, the dignitaries and the distinguished guests and everyone for coming to celebrate the beautiful life of my father. And to my Yolngo friends, families, Kabalanda, both Balanda Yolngo, for coming. I want to thank you all. And I know some of you have traveled from a very long distance to pay your respects. And thank you, everyone. I know Dad would have loved seeing you all gathered here today. Thank you.
We are here today to pay homage to a man who spent a lifetime building bridges. At the most personal level, he built a bridge to every person he met. And I was one among many who was privileged to be someone who he built a bridge to. I have been asked by the children of Dr. Gondarra to speak. Why me, I asked. Because you have known us for so long, was the repeated reply. So here with me today are all the children of Dr. Gondarra. His firstborn, Birichalawoi. His second, Jaybong, his son, first son. Wopuroi, his third child, has already introduced herself. The fourth child, Nungalinya, she's here with her husband. And one they're going to do, the last born, Dr. Gondarra and I are linked through his children. He naturally as their father, and I through adoption into Yolngo society. My Yolngo Yappa, my sister, was Wainmoli Damarangi. She was the children's grandmother, known by the kin term Maori. Their mother, Dr. Gondarra's beloved wife, Gilong Bukalachbi, was Wainmoli's daughter. This adoption made me a Ngandi mother to his wife too, as well as Maori grandmother to their children. And this kinship relationship of Mara Kotara was another relationship between Dr. Gondarra and I. As I held the relationship with his children, he and I shared that same relationship. He was my Maori. I entered this Yolngo world in 1980 at Galuinko, Elko Island. I was a linguistics graduate and came to work with the education department on a Jambarpuingo dictionary, with Wainmoli designated as my teacher, and she became my yappa. I arrived in February with the wet season in full throttle. In those days, there were no air conditioning, no phones, no televisions. Radio, telephones and telegrams and handwritten letters were the main modes of communication. It was a quieter, more self-contained world for Yolngo. communications that would bring the outside world more forcefully into their daily lives didn't come until later that decade. Wainmuli came to work with me for half of each day after she'd spent the first half on Bible translation, the main commitment of her life. Sometimes she would be accompanied by an 11-year-old Gondarra, my grandchild Burichalawoi. She was then about 11 years old. The family then included Jabong, Wopuroi and Nungalawoi, who was only 2. Burichalawoi and I still remember those days, and now herself in her 50s, she has taken on her Maori's role as a teacher of Yolngu languages and Rom or law to us Balanda. So when I first arrived at Galiwinko, it was well on its way to transitioning from mission to government control. It had begun as a Methodist overseas mission in 1942, only a few years before Dr. Gondarra was born. His father had moved across from the mission established earlier at Milingimbi to help set up the new mission at Galiwinko. That old man was still alive in my early years, and one of the earliest stories Wainmuli recorded for me to help with my language learning is a testimony to the life and contributions to the wider community of his father, Walalepa Gondarra MBE. Dr. Gondarra was his youngest son. His older sister, Rose Goyanga, is here today. They shared similar life journeys, growing up at Galiwinko, contending with the changes and challenges contact with our Balanda world imposed on them. They have both followed in the footsteps of their father, working diligently towards strong futures for their communities. In 1980, Dr. Gondarra was already ordained as a minister of the Uniting Church, and he was based at Galiwinko. And a Christian revival was in full force. It was also in the early 1980s that I experienced the end of a Ngara ceremony. Early introductions to 2 elements fundamental in shaping Dr. Gondarra's life: his Christian faith and Yolngu Rom, Yolngu law. My main links with the family for many years were through Wainmuli, Gilung and the children. Together with being a wife and mother of his children, Gilung was a committed Christian and became a Uniting Church minister herself, working alongside her husband. After 40 years of a very happy marriage, Reverend Carol Gilung Gondarra passed away in 2007. This was a deeply felt loss for all the family. I have many memories of households full of family, and Gilung full of stories. The family always moved together. There were times when they lived at Galiwinko, other times in Darwin. Yirrkala, on Golomala country, the Gondarra family's country at Barkara, and making links to his mother's country with the home they built at Galkila, just south of Yirrkala. Since 2010, I have been living in Darwin, and from that year, Mara became a regular visitor to my home. And when he did not have his own place in Darwin, I think it became his place of choice, and I'm sure it was the family connection that made it so. During these later years, Murray and I have shared stories and quiet times, and I have watched as he went in and out to meet official commitments, face new challenges, and to celebrate achievements. Times for me to get familiar with the warmth of his spirit and to build treasured memories. Dr. Gondarra's wider work in his life of building bridges was a constant side story for me. The canvas was ever expanding from Galiwinko to broader Yolngu society, the Northern Territory, wider Australia and the world. Through the 1980s, he was pursuing and writing about contextualising theology between Yolngu spirit beliefs and Christianity, lecturing here at Nungalinya, taking on higher roles within the Uniting Church, brought the family to Darwin on several occasions. And in 1995, he received an Order of Australia medal in recognition to his services to the Uniting Church and Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Congress. He was also continuing to meet his obligations with Yolngu Society and became formally acknowledged as a senior clan leader, Adalkara Jirike for the Durali Nation. And recently he mentioned to me, so during these later decades, his bridge building expanded beyond the church. He was involved in bridges between Yolngu society and growing successful local businesses involving Yolngu from the ground up. He also worked on bridges between Yolngu and wider Australian society through the development of cross-cultural understanding and the recognition of Yolngu law. His most recent project was the film about his life, Nakara. This is a bridge offered to all of us Australians. Sinem, his adopted Ngandi and co-producer, along with many of us, will also be forever grateful that he was able to participate in the launch himself and that we will have his story for all time. Speakers to follow will give full testimony to all those bridges that he built. What I want to give testimony to is the centrality of life in his life to his family. After Gilung died, family came to his side. I recall Gayacha, daughter of Gilung's younger sister, who had also passed away, often accompanying him to Darwin in the early years after she died. In recent times, spiritual Oi has been a constant companion, often along with a grandson or a great-grandson. His children have grown up and made their own homes at Galuwinkle, Gapawiak, Darwin and Yirrkala. And he absolutely delighted in the grandchildren. There are now 18 and they're all listed for you in the program. They're members of the Gorlamala, Puraruanga and Yunupingo Yolngu clans. The young ones recently bringing him great joy were the great-grandchildren, and there are 14 of them. He loved his family. He welcomed all partners, provided support and guidance to his children through their lives. He was kind, generous and patient, but there were strong expectations that they abide by Yolngu law as well as develop their Christian faith. Careful in expressing his authority, it was always present. He was also committed, as any good Yolngu father, to establishing secure futures for his descendants. The challenges he faced as a Yolngu, born in the times he was, were exceptional. And this exceptional man found exceptional ways to guide future generations to facing their own futures.
I now invite the Honourable Leah Finocchiaro, the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, to bring a tribute on behalf of the Northern Territory Government.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute honour to be here this morning on such a sombre occasion, but marking the legacy of a man who has given so much for so long to so many. I'd like to acknowledge Larrakia and Yolngu leaders past, present and emerging here today, and everyone who's come out to support the family and friends of someone who's been much loved and will continue to be loved throughout our community. I'd also importantly like to acknowledge Yinya Gayula, Marion Scrimgeour, member for Lingiari, for being here today. Reverend Dr. Gondarra was born on the 1st of February 1945. He grew up in the missions in Milingimbi and later settled on Elcho Island. Dr. Gondarra was a Yolngu man and pioneering Aboriginal leader who dedicated his life to fighting for the freedom and justice of his people. At the age of 15, Dr. Gondarra began training as a Sunday school teacher and a youth worker. He also undertook his responsibilities to learn Yolngu Rom and was eventually appointed by the elders and leaders of Nakara Dirinjai, leader for Darilli Clan Nation and Namu Clan Nation. Over time, Dr. Gondarra became a senior leader of a political, legal, economic and social alliance of several clans, and he was highly respected amongst his people. In 1976, Dr. Gondarra was ordained at Galiwinku, becoming the first Yolngu minister appointed to a congregation and Australia's first ever Aboriginal Methodist minister. Throughout his career, Dr. Gondarra read and travelled extensively, visiting Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, Korea and Pacific Islands to study, meet and learn with other First Nations people. All the while, he maintained his traditional law and culture, bridging the gap between very different worlds. Dr. Gondarra was the first Indigenous moderator of the Northern Synod, as well as the first Indigenous representative on the World Council of Churches. He received a doctorate from the University of the Round Table in Arizona and an Order of Australia Medal. Dr. Gondarra also served as the chairman of the Arnhem Land Progress Aboriginal Corporation for more than 30 years, and I acknowledge the large presence here today. Reverend Dr. Gondarra died at home on Galiwinku, Elko Island, on the 18th of June, surrounded by his family. He was 79 years of age. Dr. Gondarra instilled an enormous sense of pride in Yolngu people for their language, law and culture. His empowering legacy will live on. I'd like to acknowledge and send our sincerest condolences to the family, his eldest sister, children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews. The entire Northern Territory is with you today on this very sad occasion, but we hope that this memorial marks his legacy and is a comfort to you and your family at this very saddest of times. May he rest in peace.
I now invite, I think I can say, the member for Mulka, Ingia Markulila.
Yo, good morning, yol ngwal ngatil, yol ngokor, tial depong jal kringor, lemur na kunwal lanyra lemuriangal, dual nam na kanina, apagi yol ngo wanganyo al wanangor to come ka join lemurong dual nawe. Yan ngara nawe yakara ka yindi kunamnya, but I stood and remembered the old man, Anya, Dr. Gondarra, and asked the government whether we could have a state funeral. Thank you for acknowledging Ganawe. And wala kulimurong yoram, katuwa na ngay, nakunawe di pali. We would like to thank everyone for being here and the newly formed government. There are some politics, but politics that will lead us towards understanding each other, to acknowledge and accept one another. It's not about what we do in the chamber, but what really happens out here on the ground, out on the field with the people. So I knew Dr. Gondarra, and when he was only a minister, became a minister, although he had to do some studies to be a Bible studies teacher, and I out there, and then I met him Then I met the family. And my older sister, Goiwanga, Gondarra. And then by coincidence, I happened to be joined up with a family and was living with Goiwanga and family. And that's how I knew Dr. Gondarra very well. Started to work with him. To cut the story short, to explain about who he was and what he was about to do and what he wanted to see for changes. He took up the ministry and then said, yeah, we can have the Bible and preach and praise God through how Balanda way of system, Balanda worships. But I will show you how it's done through Yolngu Rom. And he has done that. And he has done that, and he have succeeded to show that God's Holy Spirit and his works are here with their presence. From then on, trying to advocate with the government, there is something wrong, we are not being listened to. We are not being listened to. The government, the states or the territory, and the federal government. We saw a river through the Mongol ceremony came along. It was created through, it was mixture of 4 or 5 clan different, that was a colonized, that was a power that was driven to come and process and extend this is us, this is who we are. At the Lukungara. The Lukungara is a mulka space and a ceremonial space, but a diplomatic space where you and I come to sit down together and discuss issues to work. And hopefully he will leave that reminder for us all working in the departments, working in those fields of studies, whatever we do. May his remembrance of the Lukungara remains in those organizations and of course in the Parliament House. And that will journey out up to the Parliament House in Canberra. No matter how big and high the powers are in the federal government, this is almost exactly the same. This is the Lukungara that will reach and create a pathway so that Balanda and Yolngu, we can work together and we can live together and understand each other. None of this stuff about we think we know what's best for you. No, we know what's best for us. Yolngu know what's best for us. And we want to see a pathway. This is a ceremony, this is a state funeral, and also a reminder that we need to understand and accept that his pathway will be remembered and try and come to close that gap, to close that gap. People are worried about treaty. People are worried about sovereignty. We are. Yolngu people are worried. We are being left out. Our sovereignty are being left out. So through this, and in the chamber, in Canberra, and everywhere, we must work together to make the community better, to make community so that we all live together and we understand each other, so that we have a space where people can make decisions for themselves, where people can make decisions and create a pathway, two-way pathway. And I keep on saying treaty is one of the tools that must be always echoed out through the country, must be always understood, must be always put into actively so that we can be understood and we can work together. One last thing, I was told there's no countdown clock down there, but the last thing I want to say is we need to see the sovereignty. We need to accept what we want to do. We need to build that pathway, the two-way pathway. You walk on your pathway, Palanda, and let us you all walk our way so that we meet the same goal through so that our people will survive and understand. And to conclude my speech here, I walked into the chamber, and I felt there's something strange happening there. From the field out here on the ground, when I walked into the chamber, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong. So we need to get more Yorma walk in there so that we can work together and close that gap and understand each other. Treaty and sovereignty must be acknowledged and accepted by governments, the parties, and Yorma working together so that we make a pathway so that it's somewhere we can achieve and reach the goal where we want to go. Thank you.
I acknowledge the presence with us of members of the Uniting Church from across Australia. I believe all the regional councils of the Uniting Aboriginal Christian Congress is represented here, showing their respect to this great leader. Particularly, I acknowledge the presence of Reverend Sharon Hollis, the ex-national president of the Uniting Church, and she's bringing an apology and greetings from our current president, the Reverend Carissa Sulu. I also acknowledge the presence of Rob Floyd, who is representing the National Secretary of the Uniting Church. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Mark Kickett, who is the chairperson of the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress, to bring a tribute on behalf of the Uniting Church. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to acknowledge the Chief Minister and all the dignitaries who are here. I also want to acknowledge my brother Richard Fijo. Thank you. It's always an honour to be on your country, my brother, and to share the stories of Uncle Wally and all those beautiful journeys that we share as one people. I acknowledge and pay respects to all the Yolngu clans right throughout East and West, and all our peoples that are connected into the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress. It has often been said that the church, or we as, I guess, leaders and people in general, sit on the shoulders of giants that who have gone before us and who've laid the foundations before us. In the case of the Uniting Church, in its own history and its own story, is one such as the first president by the name of Davis McCackney, who was also instrumental in the drafting of the basis of union. But it's so many of those lives that have come on that have shaped who we are and have shaped what we've become, and all those lives that have shaped the life of the Uniting Church in Australia as we've moved forward. A good friend of mine by the name of Richard LeBroy with the Uniting Church Historical Society and school chaplain and a Uniting Church pastor, made a comment as he wrote a particular paper. He said, "History teaches everything, including the future. History gives us a window to the past, but also allows us to glimpse the future. Our history contains many markers of our Uniting Church identity. Our history shows us that we are courageous and risk takers. It shows us that we are pioneering and missional, and it shows us that we are people focused and inclusive. These are key markers of our Uniting Church DNA and are writ large in the fabric of our history." Enter into that story the Reverend Dr. D. Gondarra, and I thank Stuart McMillan for much of the information that I've been able to glean through this. And as we've heard, from the Chief Minister, he was born in 1945 in East Arnhem. And what interests me is that as a 15-year-old, he heard the voice and the call of the Creator God into his heart and into his life, that he would commit himself to train as a Sunday school teacher as a 15-year-old and also a youth leader. 4 years later, at the age of 19 years, he spent a year at Alcorn College in Brisbane undertaking a lay preacher's course. And then as a 20-year-old in 1969, he went to Papua New Guinea to undertaking Christian education and then returning to Raronga Theological College for further study in 75. As we heard, he was ordained at Gallowinku in 76 and became the first Yolngu minister appointed to a congregation. It wasn't long after this, just 3 years, that the now well-documented revival began at Gallowinku, which spread across the top end of the territory, went down into the APY lands and even came over into my country, the southwest of Western Australia. That revival that began through that man's commitment and involvement. The call of God was firstly to minister amongst his people and to be a minister of reconciliation with first and second peoples within the church. And secondly, to be a passionate advocate for justice for his people and more widely all First Nations people of Australia. He undertook the necessary training in Yolngu Rom law to eventually be chosen as the senior lawman for his clan and nation, Golomula, and for his Ringich, that political, legal, economic and social alliance of 4 clans and nations. Stuart McMillan further informs that as Reverend Dr. Gondarra was undertaking Old Testament studies at his time at Raronga, a passion began to burn intensively in his heart about contextualising theology. He travelled and read extensively and was deeply influenced by theologies of empowerment and justice coming from the African American communities and then the liberation theologies from South America. He had time with First Nations people in Canada, took to heart Minjung theology emerging out of the Korean context, studied in Japanese buffalo theology, and from his Melanesian sisters and brothers, he could learn about coconut theology. Representing the Uniting Church on the Central Committee of the World Council of Churches and attending meetings and conferences organised by the Christian Conference of Asia were rich experiences of exchanging, sharing and growing. From all of these relationships, he developed with other First Nations leaders a truly authentic Indigenous theology for First Nations people of Australia. With Reverend Charles Harris, Reverend Dr. Gondarra visited and spent time with First Nations people in Aotearoa in New Zealand with the Maori brothers and sisters, encouraging them to grow the black church in Australia. And so the First Nations gathering in Christian leaders from across Australia came together in 1992 at Crystal Creek in North Queensland, out of which the Uniting Aboriginal Island Christian Congress was born. Then the idea of a covenant between the UAICC and the Uniting Church of Australia came after some bitter experiences at the Uniting Church Assembly, breaking a promise in 1985, which had been made to the UAICC in 1982 to boycott the centenary celebrations in 1988 if there had been no advance for First Nations land rights and justice more broadly. The covenant, according to Reverend Gondarra and Reverend Charles Harris, would find first and second peoples of the Uniting Church bound with each other in a relationship under God, and this would contribute to a more just church and a more just nation. In 1994, when the Assembly meeting witnessed the signing of the covenant instruments, it was Reverend Dr. Gondarra's Ringditch Clan Nation Alliance which presented the sacred covenant painting to the then President Dr. Jill Tabat. He also preached at the opening of this meeting on the covenant relationship which David had with Jonathan as described in the Bible. This was the depth of a relationship he and the other UAICC leaders sought to grow with the Uniting Church. Reverend Dr. Gondarra represented the Yolngu peoples, the Uniting Aboriginal and Christian Congress, and the Uniting Church of Australia on the Council for Reconciliation from 1997 to 2000. He's one of the leaders in the historic march of some 300,000 First and Second Peoples crossed the Harbour Bridge in Sydney in support of reconciliation. And another 300,000 walked for the same cause over the following 6 months in various parts of this nation. The 12th Assembly meeting in 2009 made another historic decision to insert a new preamble in the Uniting Church of Australia's Constitution, recognising First Peoples and the failures of the Church in the past for its acts of violence, dispossession and committing to a different future. Ever an advocate for his people and for all First Nations people, Reverend Dr. Gondarra travelled to Geneva in 2010 with Rosalie Kunoth Monk's OAM to attend an international convention on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. They were able to highlight the terrible situation in Australia which First Peoples faced. The following year he travelled to London and gave a speech outside the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights officers and then met with the commissioners to discuss the injustices and tragic consequences facing First Nations people through the enactment of the so-called Northern Territories intervention. When the 2018 Assembly meeting affirmed the sovereignty of First Nations people, this made his heart sing. His passionate advocacy continued and now became his legacy for others to achieve, and for all Australia governments and their legislatures to simply recognise the sovereignty of First Nations people, and for the Yolngu peoples, these government and legislatures to recognise that the Yolngu Rom, the legal system, as being legitimate. Like sovereignty, it is described in the Statement from the Heart, this Yolngu Rom legal system coexists alongside the Commonwealth legal system, which has not extinguished it. There's a little poem that talks about one solitary life. And it says he was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another obscure village where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. He never wrote a book, he never held an office, he never went to college, he never visited a big city. He never travelled more than 200 miles from the place where he was born. He did none of these things, usually associated with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves, and while dying, his executioners gambled for his clothing, the only property he had on earth. And when he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 19 centuries have come and gone, and today Jesus is the central figure of the human race and the leader of mankind's progress. All the armies that have ever marched, all the navies that have ever sailed, all the parliaments that have ever sat, all the kings that have ever reigned put together have not affected the life of mankind on earth as powerfully as that one solitary life. Today we are privileged to recognise and celebrate one extraordinary life, a man simply called by God, a man who was faithful, a man who was courageous and groundbreaking in all that he did, a man who was a pastor, a preacher, an author, an activist, yes, a first Indigenous moderator of a synod, a lecturer, and not least a husband, a father, a grandfather, a family and community man. The Uniting Church of Australia and the Uniting Aboriginal and Christian Congress, First Nations people and Australia as a nation have been enriched by this humble, passionate Yolngu man who has fought the good fight. May he now rest in peace, and may we whose lives have been enriched by knowing him continue to follow his Christ-like example. Thank you.
I now call upon the CEO of ALPA, Aboriginal Corporation, Alistair King, who has had a long and productive relationship with the Reverend Doctor. Thanks, Alistair.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd first like to thank the NT government for showing the respect to Chairman Gondarra for providing today's state service, and thank you to our new Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, and her deputy for coming today in what would have been a very busy first week of government. I'd like to thank the family for allowing us to come together today and celebrate his life and achievements. Thank you all also to Nungalinya College for hosting today's service, where the relationship with Chairman Gondarra goes back to the days as a young minister he lectured and had fellowship here. And finally, thank you to the members of the Memorial Organising Committee for helping us get here today, and to our ALPA team for helping get things done. They reckon that Protocol Department Chief Minister is awesome, just so you know. Reverend Dr. Gondarra OAM was our chairman of 30 years, and I was his CEO for 22 of those years. Reverend Dr. Gondarra OAM was a leader and one of the few men who could live in and transcend his Yulnga world and the Ballanda or non-Indigenous world. And because of that, he was a teacher and selflessly helped all of us to understand two worlds that he dedicated his life to and tried to bring together to live in harmony. He was involved in so much across his life, but I will focus mainly on his commitment to ALPA. Today we bid farewell to a remarkable leader, former long-standing chairman of ALPA, whose passing in June this year has left an indelible mark on the hearts of all that knew him. Chairman Gondarra's life was a testament to his unwavering dedication to the Yulnga people of North East Arnhem Land and the broader First Nations community in Australia. His leadership journey with ALPA started in 1993 when he was elected as our first Yulnga chair, a role he held with distinction until his retirement in 2023. Under his guidance, ALPA transformed from a modest retail organisation of just 8 stores into the largest and most diverse Aboriginal corporation in Australia. His vision and commitment to economic empowerment of his people saw ALPA grow from those 8 small stores when he was elected to a thriving First Nations enterprise that now serves as a cornerstone of economic development and self-determination in Arnhem Land and beyond. He led and mentored and developed our current and former directors who were part of ALPA's journey of success. Not many people would know or remember that in 2001 ALPA had financial challenges. Our 54-year journey has not always been smooth. Chairman Gondarra and the board took charge and made difficult decisions to restructure the board, change key management, and authorise the newly appointed CEO to restructure ALPA's business. Within 12 months, ALPA was back on track and has never really looked back because of those hard decisions and the lessons learned. During Chairman Gondarra's tenure, ALPA started and largely funded the establishment of a new credit union to support our remote communities after the banks largely left remote communities. Traditional Credit Union, TCU, opened in December 1994. In 2002, ALPA acquired its first warehouse in Darwin, our most significant asset to date at the time, and acquired our second in Alice Springs in 2003. By 2009, ALPA had purpose-built a new independent grocers warehouse in East Arm alongside our new office complex. In 2012, we celebrated our 40th anniversary and had achieved all the goals the board had set. We had a solid business model with 24 stores in the group. We were financially independent of government and had a strong balance sheet with growing contributions to our communities. In fact, in 2023, the year the chairman retired, ALPA achieved a record in community contributions of $48 million in real wages, infrastructure upgrades, benevolent programs and sponsorships to our member communities. In 2013, ALPA acquired the Island and Cape business, a remote retailer in far north Queensland, and we also commenced our journey in employment services with the federal government through the RJCP program. This saw ALPA accelerate its growth and diversity, establishing our enterprise division to create small to medium businesses to drive more local employment and upskilling opportunities while becoming Australia's largest Indigenous corporation. Chairman Gondarra's contributions were recognised with numerous accolades through his life, including an Order of Australia Medal in 1995 and a Cultural Doctorate in Literature from the World University Roundtable in Arizona in 1991. These honours reflected his lifelong commitment to advancing the social, cultural and spiritual well-being of First Nations people. Chairman Gondarra's leadership, wisdom and compassionate spirit have left a lasting impact on ALPA and the wider community. His ability to connect with people from all walks of life, coupled with his deep cultural knowledge and unwavering commitment to his people, made him a true pioneer in the pursuit of Indigenous self-determination and economic empowerment. As we reflect on his remarkable life, we are reminded of the immense contributions he made not only to ALPA, but also to all First Nations people. His legacy will continue to guide and inspire us as we strive to build on the foundations he laid. Again, we thank his family for their generosity in allowing us to come together today and offer our sincere condolences. We will continue to honour Chairman Gondarra's legacy by continuing the important work he dedicated his life to, ensuring that his vision for prosperous and empowered Yolngu people lives on. He is already missed.
I now invite members of the Molerom project, Paul Tolliday, Justine Davis and Jared Sharp, together with Ruth Wallace from CDU, to give a tribute.
My name is Ruth Wallace. I'm from Charles Darwin University, and I'm here on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor, staff and students of the university. I acknowledge Larrakia and I acknowledge Richie and his family, the Gondarra family, all Yolngu leaders, and everyone who is here to pay respect to this wonderful man that we really loved, that we argued with, that we negotiated with, and he taught us and we learned. Dr. Gondarra approached the university in 2005 with his vision for a collaboration between the Western Academy and the Academy of the Durali Clan Nation, an opportunity for these two different knowledge traditions to come together and speak to each other, or more importantly, to listen to each other. Real, deep and attentive listening that is at the core of Yolngu learning. A productive and generative conversation about peacemaking, leadership and reconciliation was developed. It took a while for the Western Academy to properly understand the significance and the importance of the relationship. But as our understanding grew, the significance of exploring how two disparate ways of knowing about the world could work together created something that could change and grow our nation. So important to all of this was that our work together as two institutes of knowledge was a real relationship. It wasn't easy and didn't necessarily head in directions we were expecting. and to be honest, we didn't always agree. But the honour that Dr. Gondarra bestowed on the relationship was such that he and his family never walked away from it, even when it was hard. He demonstrated commitment to the equality of the relationship. He honoured the opportunity for Yolngu knowledge institutions and Western Academy to speak to each other and to treat each other with the parity of esteem. Here, we found ways of seeing the world, trying to speak to each other as equals, and we carry that into our work today. He applied his sharp intellect. He challenged us, but he always with wisdom. He spoke of and practiced a generosity of spirit in his efforts to build the space between us into something that could perhaps be more than what either institution could be on its own. He will be sorely missed as a man of faith, a man of knowledge and tradition, who has contributed so much, perhaps more than we will ever realise in our lifetimes, to the life of this nation, Australia, and to the reconciliation between its First Peoples and those who have come from elsewhere who call this place home. Thank you.
We'd also like to acknowledge the Larrakia and special dignitaries. We speak on behalf of the Malrom family. With profound generosity of spirit, Reverend Dr. Gondarra opened up the Malrom ceremony, a traditional Yolngu peacemaking process designed to resolve conflict and restore balance. Together with Pat McIntyre and many others, he developed the Malrom Project, a groundbreaking cross-cultural mediation and leadership initiative unlike anything else in Australia. Partnering with remarkable individuals and institutions, including the Australian Federal Police and the Charles Darwin University, this project evolved into a master's program in Indigenous knowledges. Truly intercultural, it was taught across 2 knowledge systems, integrating both Ballanda and Yolngu content and learning styles. The Malrom project is unparalleled in Australia, and those of us fortunate enough to participate are profoundly transformed by it.
As students of Reverend Dr. Gondarra, our gratitude is immeasurable. We every day try and put into place the lessons he has taught us and the ways that Yolngu Rom can work in partnership with Ballanda Rom, particularly in areas such as restorative justice and peacemaking. We are deeply thankful for the wisdom, humour, kindness, and belief in our ability to work together, all Australians working together, that he imparted to us. And we will always remember sitting around the mulk, hearing him say, "We are all special."
The Malrom project is now deeply mourning the loss of our extraordinary and visionary leader. He exemplified the art of bridge building and inspired a vision of peace and healing for our country. Through Malrom, he taught hundreds of people, judges, lawyers, politicians, police, educators, health workers, parents, children, a better way to handle conflict. I want to say thank you to Mari Yingagula MLA for reminding us that for his whole life, Dr. Gondarra fought for sovereignty and treaty, and that to honour him is to continue that fight. We will continue that fight and continue to carry his vision forward, striving to create peace in our own lives and realise Makarrata in this land.
And I invite Richard Trudgeon, long-time companion and worker with the Reverend Doctor. Thanks, Richard.
Yay. Coming after all those speeches, eh? How could one man fit all that into a lifetime? Oh. I came north in 73. Gamarang then, I call him Gamarang, that's his Malk name. He's all these terms, we have trouble in English and Yungamata. English and Yungamata. What should I call this man? He called me grandmother. I called him grandchild. And that sounds strange to us, but it's because we don't know the original family structure of Australia. We still have the boat language and the boat culture that turned up here and took over the original Australian culture and the original Australian law that we saw represented here this morning. We saw a haka, we saw a guard of honour, which even Captain Cook saw right throughout the Pacific and different places. We don't even know it's here. A culture that is dying, a culture that's being pushed aside, that could be solving all the problems. I came in 1973, and the first thing I was forced to do, and I came just for 12 months, I was forced to learn language, Aboriginal Australian language, which I didn't want to learn. I said, I didn't come here to learn gobbledygook. I come here to help the people. And they said, we don't care what your attitude is, young fella. You will stop every Thursday afternoon, no matter how busy you are, and you will learn language. Within 3 months, I was pushed off Milingimbi across to the mainland, where nobody spoke English. They were traditional people. And I was probably one of the last standing people in Australia that was lucky to learn the old language, the language that is even dying now because we're not accepting the traditional education system of Yolngu. We're still implanting a colonial system in. I didn't know Gamarang for most of that time, the Reverend Dr for most of that time. He was at Gallimico, I was at Ramagini. And then we started to get to know each other when he tried to open up a traditional university called Gunapipi at Gallimico, and he got into all the trouble with all the Ballanda there. Oh, you can't do this, and he flew over to Ramagini because we'd actually reinitiated this university system. It's still out there today, guys. When the Garma Festival's on, there's other people, up to 3,000 meeting in other parts of Arnhem Land without any government funding, without any government support, and hopefully it'll stay that way. And it does real teaching. And he came and we talked together. I said, why did you come and talk to me about this? And he says, well, you're the only one on the English side, the Ballanda side, that can give me some direction here. We talked about it, he went back and they initiated the arm of the parliament. It's called the Wanamala for Gunapipi. We didn't see each other for a long time after that. I got crook, went out, 8 years regrowing a liver after antibiotics nearly took me out from gold staph infection. I was back down south. He was doing all the stuff that Congress was talking around. And I started getting phone calls from him and running into him. He says, can you come and help us sort out some problems in New South Wales and all that? I said, this is really not my territory. I was a fitter and turner, then turned into a community worker, community development worker, trained here at Nungalinya College and other places. I didn't know much about this, but I stepped into it. And we started to even negotiate things there and sort out troubles between different people groups. And next minute he's asking me to come back to Northern Territory. And I said, why? Aren't you guys, you've taken over control, the mission is finished and it's handed everything over. And he says, I am sick of putting coffins on the plane, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. I am sick of it. There must be another way. Come back, I want you to initiate community development in ARDS, Aboriginal Resource and Development Service, which he was CEO of then. And so I come back, and since then, it's almost been sometimes a daily incursion, but at least 2 or 3 times a week on the phone, trying to understand what it is that what's the problem between 2 people groups when the heading of the next book, when a new world drops in on a group of people. What is it that creates the division? What is it that creates the problems? How is it they can't come together? And I remember a conversation with him. We were sitting in the staff meeting, Aboriginal Resource and Development staff meeting. There's one staff member here that'll still remember that. And he was talking about, he says, I've been on reconciliation councils, I've been all over the world, I've been here, I've been there, I'm having all these conversations with everybody, and nothing's happening. And he says, what is it? He says, now I realise that we can talk together in English for up to 20 minutes, then I realise we're not even understanding each other. He said like this with his hands, we're missing each other. What is it that we're missing? And I remember once when this happened, actually in the Chief Minister's office of one of your colleagues in the past, and I took a whiteboard pen and started drawing on the Chief Minister's glass table, which I got reprimanded for. You don't do that, apparently. And what we started talking about, there's like a brick wall between two groups of people. There's things like history, there's language, there's culture, there's law, the Australian law, which my grandchild, the Reverend Dr. was continually talking about. He just said, if they just recognise our law, all the problems will disappear. And he says, why is it so difficult? He even tried to get diplomatic conversations going between prime ministers of the past. Come and talk to us like a group of people. Don't treat us like we're animals and we haven't got any sense or knowledge. We've got knowledge that goes back 60,000 years. Why do we want to deny it and continually deny it? This was his challenge continuously. And we look for different mechanisms and so on. There's so much lawlessness out there now. He says in the latest film that he has just done, Ngara made the law of the land, he says that the Western system just brings a form of dictatorship where it divides families, where families now fighting over royalties, the wrong families getting the money. Even the Lands Council can't get it right. We're not getting it right. And one of the reasons we're not getting it right is because of language. If we use just English to talk to people, people misunderstand what's going on. It's funny, you know, in the 1970s and 80s, some of the old people had a better ability to communicate in English than what a lot of people today have. They've gone back into their language rather than to move into English. And let me just give you a quick example of why might that be. And this was the conversation that was coming from the Reverend Dr. between me and him, at least weekly and sometimes every second or third day. No government in 200 years has provided a Yungamata to English open source learning program. Now, if you want to learn any language in the world, you just Google online and you can get languages all over the world, but no Yunga person or other First Nation person who still speaks their first language can do that. Why? Because the colonial system keeps talking about you have to just learn English. I know people still in Arnhem Land today, some have just passed away, who were whipped for speaking their own language. The colonial system tried to whip it out of the people. Today we use other mechanisms, sometimes well-funded mechanisms. Like, for example, if you want to shoot basketball hoops or kick footballs, you can get all the money in the world. You get Toyotas that you can drive around on weekends, you get salaries, you get accommodation, you get everything. There are 51 youth programs in northeast Arnhem Land. 51. How many English learning programs exist? Nil. How many adult learning programs exist? Nil. Where we're working with the people's questions, where we're working with this old man's questions. He went through all that, and yet he died disappointed. He died a pauper on the veranda of relatives. He didn't even have a house back at Galliancourt because of all the changes that have gone on with shires and organised all by Darwin and bureaucrats, take over this, take over that. Another thing, back in those mission days, they even had a council of elders who helped control the whole community under traditional law. All that's gone today. I can look at a man now who got almost arrested for trying to be a leader in community and carrying around one of those what do you call them, wumra, which is the only weapon that traditional law people carry as a sign of authority. He gets arrested for that because it's now considered a weapon. A few months later or so off that, he's trying to break up a gang of young guys fighting, and he gets stones thrown at him, and he didn't have anything to protect himself. Got hit in the face with the rock. So does he go out now and try and solve the problems? No, he gives up. He says, it's impossible. Let more and more police come, and more and more and more and more police, and more and more and more, and build bigger jails and all those things. They seem to be the answers. This old man, Dr. Gondarra, was looking for the answers. He wanted to find the way where two people could come together. He died disappointedly. And he said to me, just a couple more and I'll stop, because we could talk on for 2.5 days here. Done it before. He said to me before, we'd spent 12 months trying to get medical attention for him. And I'll probably write it up as a case study. I've got 32 other case studies going in another book called Give Us Life, Give Us Information. Just give us information. Talking to a young man today who spent 5 days in Gove. Still doesn't know what's wrong with himself. Just give us information in a language we can understand, through a worldview we can understand. Now, we can go down to a deep biomedical level in Yungamata now. Me and my eldest son can do it. We can go down up to a constitutional law level in law. We can speak the trade language of North Australia. These are the things that me and the Dr. Gondarra were talking about and teaching each other. From the old man at Rumminginning to his new knowledge when he'd find something new, a new term that explained some of the English terms he was confused about. He'd be on the phone, he says, oh, I've discovered it. It means this, it's this word. And then I'd say, well, give me some pictures. Yeah, that looks like it's matching up. What was I going to say to you? In the last week, he said to me, do not give, we're trying to get that appointment. We got an appointment 1 week before he passed away to see a neurologist in Darwin. Why did it take that so long? It takes that long for Aboriginal people to get any answers because they're working with a system that's against them all the time. There are no true language services. See, if you look at languages across the world, all the European languages and all, they've been talking together for 2,000 years, right? 2,000 years at least. If you look at even English and say Pacific Islands, the Fijians, the Tongans, the Samoans, how long? Any guesses? How long? How long has English been working with some of you guys? 180 years? 200 years? Yeah. How long has it been for Yolngu people? 75. And that's the problem. Yolngu were isolated from what was happening across the world and everywhere else until about 75 years ago. Language a little bit started to happen, and it's still not happening properly at the moment yet. Some of us volunteer into it every day. Me and my sister here are working on new terms, the list of English words that they've got, which never seems to stop. How do we say this? How do we explain this? Like my brother over here who says, how am I going to explain this stuff tomorrow? I said, just get up and go for it, brother. We won't be able to really sort it out. Yeah? Yeah? Witiana, I'm calling your name. Witiana rings me yesterday, says, please help me. How am I going to say this in English? And he can do master of ceremonies all over the world, even the Olympic Games and everywhere and da-da-da-da. But he cannot get an English learning program. Now, if this isn't a great shame in this country, then I don't know what is. So what did my grandchild say to his grandmother? When we got the appointment, he said, no, it's too late. It's too late. I got no more strength left in me. He died a pauper on a relative's veranda. He had trouble even getting, when some other people wanted to give him some money, getting money to him and getting that exchanged into food. The list goes on. But he didn't complain about any of those things. He said, my instructions to you, now that's what I was going to tell you, because the last instructions were when we talking about the brick wall and things not going, he said, Wamut, that's my skin name, he says, you must write about it. And all the other staff laughed. Why? He can't write anything. And that's right, I left school almost hopeless in being able to read and write. I learned that with Yungo. He says, no, you've got to write it because somehow it's in your head. Now, I don't know why it's in my head or it's how it's in my head, but it's in my head and it drives me nuts. The differences and the reasons why and the blockages. And that started 3 years of hell writing that first book, Why Warriors Lie Down and Die. And I couldn't get him to talk about the most important subject that we continually talked about, which was the Mahadobalyon, the confusion between the two systems, where Ballanda don't understand Yungo, Yungo don't understand Ballanda, and we're missing each other too. He says, that's the major problem, along with them not recognising our law. So what does he say to me a week before he dies? He says, don't forget my instructions. Where's the second book and the third and the fourth and the fifth? That's now got to happen, covering different elements of when a new world drops in on you. And he says, get our traditional parliaments recognised. If wala tadarangan naparango ngara yuok, our traditional parliaments as a legal chamber of law, our democratic Madayan system of law, if they recognise that, even if they just recognise, and you've heard the word probably 3 or 4 times already this morning, but it probably goes straight over, even if they just recognise the Dalkara Jirike, the political, democratically selected and endorsed, sworn in even, leaders of Arnhem Land, and we had a council of those people, it wouldn't change everything in 5 minutes, but it'd start the conversation which would lead towards a lawful resolution to all the rubbish we're seeing on TV, all the kickback, all the anger, all the everything that's going on. It would start to bring a legal process into play. He said, do not give up on that. I want you, grandmother, I want you to go as hard as you can on it. And I said, oh, thank you, Gondarra. I'm not sure I should say thank you. But anyway, the morning I heard that he'd gone, I wasn't sad. I was happy for him. He wasn't in pain anymore. And the confusion that was in his head about how these two systems keep missing each other and the ways that they could come together not being recognised, not by old missionaries or people in the past or anything, but by a very modern secular society who still do not want to recognise the original systems, culture, law and everything of this land that speaks to us continually, that should be making us agonise over what is happening. Young kids out there that are stealing cars and smashing into houses and all that, they are kicking back. I said to the other government before you guys, I said to them, look, Chief Minister, if you really want some answers, I could give you, no, the bully boys blocked all that. And they seem to keep, because we only work within what we know. We don't know what we don't know. And it's important when problems exist that we actually do an analysis of what is going on and find the deep answers. Because if we don't find that, we'll just spend a lot more money and we'll be in the same place in another 10 years. So, Murray, Gondarra, my grandchild, he said, grandmother, do it. And the Spirit has spoken.
Yes, Spirit blows. Thank you, sir. One last tribute, which will be read for us by Sinem Sabin, close confidant and producer of Rukunara. This is a message from Jeff McMullen from Concerned Australians. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for being so patient on this hot day. So, speaking on behalf of Concerned Australians, journalist, author and filmmaker Jeff McMullen sends these words about his friend. He walked so lightly in this world as if not to damage its beauty. It was an ancient law, he said, that guided every step. He wanted justice, fairness and genuine equality afforded to every man, woman and child. He thought deeply about life and was grounded in these fundamental principles, urging us all to follow our moral compass, rather than accept the dictates of the Northern Territory intervention. As we travelled the country campaigning from town to town, we shared rooms, dinner tables, and many a stage. His memorable voice had a soothing peacefulness, and it brought calm to everyone in our little band of brothers and sisters. We would screen the film Our Generation, the musicians would play, and then his prophetic voice would explain to large audiences how trampling human rights anywhere would always have disastrous outcomes. This Rolling Thunder tour gathered force and took him to Geneva to protest to the UN High Commissioner, Dr. Navri Pillay, about what was happening at home. I will never forget how he measured his words so carefully, thoughtfully, and with genuine respect. Even towards political opponents, he preferred tolerance, as if through his patience they would come to see the truth. That we are one, and our best aspect as human beings is our ability to love. I'm going to add something from myself as well now. I've had the absolute honour to call Dr. Gondarra one of my best friends and my waku and my most honourable life teacher. Like a poignant and sharp burning spear, his words, although confronting for some, delivered a wisdom that this country is desperately in need of. As an initiated clan leader, he stood tall and fearless, piercing through the darkness that has been suffocating his people for decades. Never did he compromise on what he believed was right for his people, according to their Yolngu Madayan system of law, the law of this land. He never stopped pushing for treaty. After all, he would say, there are two laws in this country, one that has existed since time immemorial, while the other one has been imposed upon us from a foreign land. With this law as his Jalkari foundation, he illuminated a pathway out of the darkness for many. And even during times of great struggle, when the darkness would also try and swallow him, he would bounce back and burn even brighter. And while he never set out to divide, he was a true peacemaker, working to set things straight so that we as a country can truly heal. His connection to spirit, not only through his Christian faith, but through Yolngu's own great spirit of the universe, Wangar, was something that he embodied until his last breath. I'll leave you now with one of the most poignant things he has taught me. Freedom, he would say, is a God-given right to all human beings. It's not something that can be granted or taken away by any government or their changing laws. Waku, my love for you is timeless. I keep my promise to you to spread your message through the film we made together. You truly are a rare and precious shining diamond. And now that you are gone, you will forever be lighting up the night sky.
Thank you. I believe Kanisha Gunanbar is going to introduce a song that we can listen to. Kanisha.
Good afternoon, family, friends, and distinguished guests. My name is Kanisha Ganambar, and I am a Gondarra, granddaughter to the Reverend Dr. Gondarra. Dimata Buraranga cannot be here today, so we are now going to listen to his song called Kapumadayan. This song was gifted to Dimata by his grandfather, Dr. Gondarra. Dimata is the second eldest grandson and is also a member of the King Stingray Band. This song is about sacred kapu, water, which is called miring. It represents the Dorili nation. Thank you.
Tangun banayuta kapugurina Bangadup tuan nuku ngadalpanga Murmurni na tunggan yang anja Ngarumadain yar panjang umal pinjingo Oh tam Oh Ngaruat tango mirin ngamirin balnga Garayalk mi rapin bin mi Kapudang uyurtun ya kamadahiri Ya kuminggal ngarong barkirayo Ya Tangun banayuta kapugurina Bangadup tuan nuku ngadalpanga Murmurni na tunggan yang anja Ngarumadain yar panjang umal pinjingo Ya murmuryo katanan nuku ngabiu umara Ya murmuryo katanan kan mialan Ya murmuryo katanan nuku ngayal kundi Ya
We're now going to hear from the scriptures. I have an apology from the moderator of the Northern Synod of the Uniting Church, Reverend Tony Goodluck, whose name appears in your program, as his father has died in Adelaide and he needed to be with family. But I welcome now our former moderator, the Reverend Tracy Moboy Warangara, to the stage to read in English, and with her a senior translator, Pastor Yurin Joel Durkee, who will read in Yongamata.
The first reading taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 to 4. I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ.
Oops. Now we hear the same reading, but in Yolngomata. Yuwawa kayapa walala, koyang ingatil walal balay rungi, unele murung malangur ka na ngun walalay, ngun walakan marikin maltur mautit ko. Demurung atile. Tumaring kitirping uri walang galangangur, ninal tiar walingan god wangar yugangala. Bukmak na yan, ngamatangala. Kabukmak yan walakan uni marikin ay man makungala. Kangain marikin tur-tur walain balamangan donya. Kabukmak yan walang uni brop tur yang uli cari dukar koro padain gorayan. Wangal yang wala marikin uli cari uni kapukurnya ya kokoro. Mikop merekoro. Kanguri ngemangan donya. Kakak punya nakon walingan bukbak tanal liya lup rangal jawang kan mana para mau cikala nakon wal nyangun ninan ngo matuna miramala mau cikkono yo kabuk matuyan wal kan nguning nguri yo ngo jawala lukan ay ngatain wal ngamira ngatain kabuk matuyi wal kan nguni marcin wal kan wal ngamirin jaga po lukan di marcin bala nguni kan tawar terbing orang nguni wal ngamirin ora kondang ngurja nguni kan manak toro maltur walang galkian yoro nguni gonda ngai pinyan nguni manguci dono pa na Jesus Christ na.
The gospel reading taken from John chapter 11 verses 20 to 27. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary stayed home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world.
Palangay mate niya nga kulanganya Jesus na ibuna na palangay doon pan kumururanan ngo kangay Mary niya ka kumuruan din yan ngo ninanan ngay kan ngunulin banyinan bunbong ra palangay mate niya nga nanano kal Jesus niya bicara wala karay muli balang ni nguni ngatin niya bunana ngayon balang ni wo miringon nga rako ba ngun di nga na pero di angon bala doal dorit na nungo yuro nga rapin nga doal darangan no na ngulin nito nguni nga doon nga niya God wangar na ngulan nakon ngayon doon na ito nguni kurupa na yan kangayon Jesus yung nga nan nga bicara wawa miringon nungo ito nguni buloy wal ngatir yu garay bicara ngayon matan bako bak marangala mainggi waray nga radiakin nguni nga ito wal ngati nguni nga nguni tada waray unamirin jawaloy yuro ngayon Jesus yung lakra namin bicara minana ngarapi do wal yuwal cha wal nga kangara mukango le kango ne wal nga ko manyul ngona nyual bingo jango ne dinga nango ja ngone bele ngarapi do wal nga goro pana mirinja ngone balang to kango la yul to yul ngoi mari wal mirir ngara nanye ngai do ngone yul ngo wal ngan yan ngane na pai de nan ngoti ngonya yum nya dingam ngone to kango ne yul ngo ngara kun mari wal tire ngai do ngone yul ngo bai ngon dingam nenen ngai to kabicha na bele anu yin ngomera mari wal tira mukaninga do al dia ken malango yo garai bicara ngai matany buko bak mangal dan ngoji sonja yual ngara do al yurngon mari wal tenan ngo ngoni nindo ala ngoni manguchi do no payana oi yolngo God ko gadom mirengo. This is the word of our Lord.
To my mind, the Reverend Doctor, as we've heard, was a professor of two knowledge systems. He was a senior lawman with the Yolngu knowledge system and had considerable knowledge and wisdom about the Yolngu Lukunara, the law of the land. He was also a Christian theologian in the Western understanding. He had knowledge and wisdom about the Christian faith. And he connected the two systems in a way that changed people's thinking. When the Reverend Doctor studied the Christian scriptures, he recognised in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew story, similarities with Yolngu culture and spirituality. He discerned that Yolngu law was a gift from God. God, the Creator Spirit, the God of the Hebrews of the Old Testament, the God that was incarnate in Jesus, the Christ. An early publication of his sermons was entitled, God Gave Us the Dreaming. Although he would not use the English word dreaming in later life, the confession was clear. God was with the Yolngu from the beginning. Yolngu law was sacred. It was a forerunner to the message about Jesus, the Anointed One. Jesus the Christ was the spiritual rock and the foundation of all things, including all things Yolngu. His preaching changed beliefs about relationships of the Christian gospel to Yolngu culture and spirituality. Slowly, I might add, slowly. His beliefs were confirmed by the Holy Spirit when in the late 1970s and into the 1980s, as we heard, he led a spiritual revival in Arnhem Land and in other places around Australia. But the Reverend Doctor's spirituality was holistic. For him, justice was integral to the Christian message, as was salvation. For the healing of the people, justice had to be done. He was a warrior for justice for Yolngu. He was a warrior for justice for all Indigenous people. And he believed passionately that Yolngu needed to be self-reliant and financially independent. And so he worked with Alpha to achieve success in that enterprise, always seeking to expand its activities and increase its benefits to Yolngu. His ministry was holistic. The Reverend Doctor did as God required, according to the prophet Micah. He did justice. He loved mercy. He walked humbly with God. That is the legacy that he leaves us. That is the example we will do well to follow. Amen. Let us pray. Gracious God, we praise you for all that you have done through Jesus the Christ. By giving him to live and die for us, you showed us love without limit. By raising him from the dead, you brought us life without end. For the assurance and the hope of our faith, and for those whom you have received into your eternal joy. And we remember the Reverend Doctor at this time. We give you thanks and praise through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I now ask John Lotu and the Fijian choir to grace us.
Santo na base, anong ko? Come. Stand here. Today we've heard great things about a great man. We've heard about the family. I just wanted to talk just a bit, because we may ask, what made him such a man? His father was one of the first Yolngu missionaries. He went with Bapa Shepi into East Arnhem and to West Arnhem. Like my father, they were missionaries. We stand here with my son. About my gurung, we are his Mari. We are his grandmother from Ririchungu. So I stand here as such, but I stand here on behalf of the Fijian missionaries that worked with him. We must remember that he was born towards the end of the war in 1945. So he must have heard of stories around the campfire. So he grew up listening to how his dad accompanied these Fijian missionary captains, dodging the bombings from the enemy. So he grew up. He learned of bravery, of cruelty of men to each other, but he also learned of sacrifice. We have heard about it all today. We've heard about justice. My gurung served a God of justice. His life showed that justice. We talk about reconciliation, about God sending his one and only Son, Jesus Christ, to reconcile us to himself. The words, they aren't only words that we may throw around according to our political persuasions. They were true reality to Gurung. When asked to share something, I said, we will only sing. Sing praises to our God for such a man. And thank him, his family, and each one of us to be able to come and to commemorate. Like the advice the Apostle Paul gave Timothy, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. Yet I have kept the faith.
with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul.
Thank you, my son. Thank you. Okay.
Now invite Stuart McMillan, longtime friend and co-worker with the Reverend Doctor, to conclude with prayers of thanksgiving and prayers for family and friends.
Let us pray. God Wanga, we thank you that you received the Reverend Dr. Gondarra by baptism into your family, the church, your family on earth, and granted him the gift of eternal life. We give thanks that he chose to give himself in love and service to Christ, including advocating for justice for the sovereign First Nations peoples of this ancient land. We give thanks, Creator Spirit, for the many ways in which Gamarang shared his life with us all and with many others, in strength and in weakness, in achievement and in failure, in the brightness of joy and the darkness of despair. We remember him as one of us. We give thanks, gracious God, for the ways Gamarang gave himself to educate, bringing understanding to Balanda about the Yulnal world and the Yulnal about the Balanda world. In this, he never compromised his quest for justice, recognition of Yulnal Rom, and his Christian hope that all Australians could share this ancient land in peace and harmony with one another and creation. We thank you, Wanga, that Gamarang was a caring and loving Bapa for his children, and that he delighted in his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, loving and teaching them Yulnal understandings of the cosmos, together with your gift, Creator God, of the living Word, Jesus, the risen, crucified one. And now, God Wanga, we pray for those whose loss is greatest. Gamarang's 5 children and their partners, his 18 grandchildren and their partners, and his 14 great-grandchildren. As their hearts have been filled with the light of his love, hold them in your love, Wangar. Comfort them, Holy Spirit, with the knowledge that death is not the end of life, but rather a new part of the eternal journey of life. Their father, grandfather, and great-grandfather is now reunited with his beloved wife, those of his Garutu who have gone before, and his ancestors. So too, in time to come, will his loved ones also be so united with their loved ones who have gone before. Finally, Creator Spirit, we pray for ourselves, whose lives have been enriched through the personal connections we have had with the Reverend Dr. Gondarra. May your presence fill each heart here today and online with thanksgiving, peace, comfort, and love. In the name of Jesus Christ, the living Word. Amen.
I'd ask you to stand for this final prayer of commendation, and that will be concluded with the Lord's Prayer, and I invite you to pray the prayer in whatever language is your heart language. Holy God, by your creative power you gave us life, and in your redeeming love you have given us new life in Christ. We now commend the Reverend Dr. Gondarra to your merciful care in the faith of Christ our Lord, who died and rose again to save us, and now lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. And I invite Pastor Joe at Gondarra to bring us a final blessing. And then if you'd be seated, you can listen to the song from Yamal Marika, the bridge.
Let's pray. God Lord Bapara, pokor prandan dia daigo. Ka pokor prandan ngare ngani mundur kur prandan perkoich kana ana tipalewangalel. Mani yalang brina perdomar chigana na mere. Kara ngana pokor permitin jaga no kamar ngamatinya no ka mangochu no. In Jesus' name, amen.
See an old man dancing in the flame, telling me to stand up for my rights. I follow the river of the Milky Way, guiding me through the night for everyone. I know we can walk together for everyone. I know we can stand together for everyone. I know we're all born crawling through this maze, but we're all bound to cross paths one of these days. What are we gonna say to make each other understand that we can come together, united on this land for everyone? I know we can walk together for everyone. I know we can stand together I wanna sing this song, for we can become one, talking to the land, reaching out to everyone. I know we can walk together for everyone. Hey! I know we can stand together. I know we can walk together for everyone. For everyone.